So it says we've got about 4 minutes until race start. And yeah, we are live at round 5 of the Women's EMEA W1 Division A2 of the Zwift Racing League. We're on board with Alderney at the moment. We've got a full roster of 6 riders this evening, and here joining me on commentary is Matt Ellis. And as I just say that, the riders have started.
Yep, so we are underway. Obviously, that 4 minutes is for us in the pen. We're in a slightly different pen, so we don't get mixed up in this race. But the riders are now off. They'll take on this 9.2 kilometre circuit, taking in the Cobbled climbs course at Richmond. Very unique course, probably the hardest one they've ever done. It's the second longest one they've ever done. 3 climbs each lap, 2 classified climbs of Libby Hill, 23rd Street, and the finishing climb up Governor's Street. 5 laps, 46 kilometres in total, and 630 metres of elevation gain. So definitely, probably the most difficult course in this league.
It's certainly going to be a much longer effort than we have seen the last month or so. I think it's going to certainly suit the riders who are a bit more used to that kind of endurance effort. There's going to be a lot of punching up the climbs, but also a lot of recovering and trying to hide in the group, as we can already see the riders are jostling for position. And yeah, it's already a pretty frenetic start.
Yeah, it's quite a strange circuit, really, because we have these 3 climbs. I think what's going to happen is more riders are going to go off the back than off the front. Obviously, each time up the climb, there is points on offer for the first 10 riders on the first 2 climbs. Those are Libby Hill and 23rd Street. And points at the finish line are on offer as well. They're the bigger points, so I think a lot of the riders will be looking to get some of them to try and stay in that front group and to claim as many of these points as possible. As you know, if you've been watching the last couple of weeks, this is a points race, so all the points accumulate, and that gives a result at the end of the race. So coming down this first of the descents now, quite a shallow descent, before we tackle the first climb of Libby Hill after about 5.5 kilometres.
And as you mentioned there, Matt, with the getting maximum points, obviously that's at the finish line. There are points for, I think it's top 30 we've said in the past, for those across the final line, but there's also every lap, as you mentioned, on both. It's the final climb, so that's 23rd Street. There's points up for grabs, 10 points up for grabs for the winner of each lap, so to speak. So the first rider across the line will get 10 points, 10th place will get 1 point each lap. It's 5 laps, so obviously there's a good opportunity to build up some points there. And crucially, as we've mentioned in the past, a sometimes forgotten source of points is actually the fastest over a segment. Again, on that 23rd Street climb, there are points up for grabs for the top 10 fastest riders over that segment over the whole race. So that's over each of the 5 times up the climb. But I mean, personally, I would anticipate probably a large majority of those 10 fastest times coming on this very first lap. I think having watched a couple of the previous races throughout the day, actually the race does tend to settle down a little bit after this first, or at least the first 2 climbs. Yeah, it's just about hanging in there as long as possible, I think, today.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important to have as many riders at the front of this race towards the end as possible. Obviously, as riders tire, if you're not in that front group, you can't be getting those points for the first cross the line. So I think it's probably going to be more important in the first maybe lap or 2 not to overdo it, but to just follow the wheels. If you have an opportunity to get some points, take it, but if not, just follow the wheels, follow the draft, follow the biggest group, or at least the front group.
For sure, yeah. And it's, obviously we are now down by the river section, and this is sort of the prelude, if you like, to the longest climb on this circuit, which will be the Libby Hill climb?
The Libby Hill climb, there is points on offer on this climb as well, Travis. I know you said that there's some on 23rd Street, but there's also some on this climb as well.
Okay.
600 metres long, at 6.2% average, kicks up in the middle to around 10 or 11%. It's really quite a difficult climb to master. I know myself, I've had a couple of attempts up here. It's all about timing, really. I think the best place to go is there's this little section about 200 metres in where it flattens out, and you really have to kick there, because just after that is round a couple of bends and it's into the steepest cobbled part of the climb. As the rider's just about to head round this final hairpin before this, about 300-400 metres straight before they start the climb, you'll see under the riders there'll be like this red line across the road, and that'll mark the start of the Libby Hill climb. And over the top you'll see the banner, which is where the points will be awarded.
I think I'm right in saying as well, actually, having listened to a couple of like the pro Zwift riders and how they would necessarily tackle the climb is actually they'd be aiming to negative split it. As you said, there's a couple of really sharp, steep corners about just over halfway up the climb, and that's really where you need to be dropping those power ups once you have them, and I suppose really putting in the big effort and trying to go quicker on the second half of the climb than the first half of the climb is what I mean by negative splitting, I suppose. Would you agree with that, Matt?
Yeah, I think it's just trying to carry as much momentum as possible over that steep part of the climb. Over the top it does flatten off slightly, but a lot of time can be lost or made here as well. So the riders are just starting this climb now. They've come onto the straightest section of the climb. As you can see in the distance, there's a right-hand corner, and that will be the start of the cobbles, and that will be the start of the steepest part of this climb.
So it looks like our riders are in a decent position, so you can spot them by seeing their black jerseys with the green hand on the back. As we're on board with Frankie now, and she's driving the pace at the front, obviously trying to put some hurt on the riders behind. I think seeing on the leaderboard on the right hand side, you can also see Hannah there, sitting in about 10th position, so she's well placed as well, and coming into the climb. The other girls weren't too far back either, so fingers crossed they're sat in the wheels, and we'll be able to get over once this inevitably regroups over the top.
We can also see you on the right, Travis, for a minute then. But yeah, we've come around this second hairpin, sort of hairpin, come over the top, and we come towards the barrier, or the banner, the finish line barrier for this climb. It goes over the top into a descent, and before we start the 23rd Street climb. You can see a couple of riders sprinting towards here. I'm not sure who's winning it. Can you see?
I think that was second for Frankie there, just behind one of the riders from Rock. Well, she was sandwiched by two of the riders from Rocker Corber, and I imagine the pace will now just settle down. But I think Hannah maybe nabbed 9th or 10th there. I didn't quite see, which she wasn't on our screens then, but hopefully we'll be able to get some results on the live feed in a few seconds' time. But it looks actually though Frankie might be trying to still drill the pace in the front. It's an interesting tactic, whereas the two Rocker Corber riders seem to have dropped off a couple of metres. It's still showing as there we go, with there's still one rider in touch, but I think it's unlikely that this duo is going to stay away. But never say never.
Yeah, I've been watching some of the races from earlier in the day, and a couple of riders tried to go in the middle of the race, but they weren't successful. What Frankie really needs to do here is just try and relax. And then just before this next climb of 23rd Street, 300 metres at 10%, is really start to push on right just before this right-hand corner and really kick as much as possible at this climb, carry as much speed as possible. Obviously, she's with a group of, two other Rocker Corber cycling riders, the enemy of the Loughborough Lightning, the Recruitment Group team at the moment, fighting them for the overall.
See those orange numbers on the right hand side there? All three riders at the top were pushing well, 9 watts per kilo as Frankie just manages to hold off that Loughborough cycling rider. So that's 10 more points in the bag for Frankie, bringing her total to 19 already for the race. But obviously there are 2 Loughborough cycling riders in that top trio, so they're piling on the points, and it's sort of pressure on for the rest of our girls to try and bring up our points total. I think again Hannah was. Sorry, go on, Matt.
Sorry. I'm just looking through the live results right now. We've obviously got Frankie in that first group of 3 riders. We've got Chloe Vickers around 7 seconds behind in a group with Hannah and Alderney. Mm-hmm. And just behind that is quite a large group of about 15-20 riders containing Meg and Flora. So maybe on this next climb it should all regroup as they settle down a little bit over the top of this next climb, Governor's Street, which is, I'd say, speaking to Dave beforehand, and he said this is probably the hardest climb. It's uncategorised, there's no points at the top apart from at the finish. But after these 2 first climbs, it's a real leg sapper, especially as it falls flat over the top.
Yeah, and those 2 climbs come in very quick succession. It almost seemed like as soon as they were done with Libby Hill, they were flying down the descent and then straight onto 23rd Street, which, if anything, is a more intense climb as well. So yeah, I think it's interesting. Do you think it is all going to come back? There seems to be some fairly significant groups already. I've no doubt that this front, that Frankie and the Loughborough rider will be joined by, well, they already have been, by the 2 riders behind, but actually the group doesn't seem to be closing an awful lot behind, and if they start to work well, given that Loughborough and Loughborough Lightning are 2 of the sort of the powerhouses, if you like, in this league, do you think there'll be much motivation to bring them back?
I think with the Zwift physics, it's definitely more beneficial to be in a larger group, even if it's just 1 or 2 riders more. Some tactics might come into play. Maybe some of the Loughborough riders or the Loughborough Lightning, the Recruitment Group riders, may not want to push on as much. They have the excuse now just to sit in, draft as much as possible for later on in the race. Obviously, they've got Frankie up the road about, 10-15 seconds ahead. We've got Alderney in a group around 15 seconds behind, along with Hannah. And just behind that, we have Chloe and Laura and Meg. So maybe over the top of this next climb where it's flattened off, some of these riders might ease back, try to recover, and that is probably where the groups are going to come back together, if they do come back together, that is.
It definitely, well, we're on board with Hannah at the moment, and as you can see on the screen, the group is just splintered into 1s and 2s on this climb, so the pace has been super high over the last couple of kilometres, or not least super high, but because of the gradient, the power has had to be high, that's for sure. But I guess the mission for Hannah and Chloe there, who's just at the bottom of your screen, so on the right hand side, 5 seconds adrift of Hannah, their mission is to try and get into a group as they just crest over, the steepest part of this climb onto the false flat that Matt was mentioning just then, and yeah, try and stay in the draft, I guess, and hope that it comes back together, and if not, try and hoover up those sort of semi-minor points, I guess, that are left behind by the riders out front.
Yeah, this is definitely probably the hardest part of the course, where it's definitely split up the most on that climb, as everybody's been on their limit. Very little time to recover, and then you've got to push on again, and over the top you may just want to ease off the power just that little bit to recover, but that's where the gaps can be made. Obviously we can see Hannah here. The group with Chloe is there's a good couple of riders in that group, so hopefully it should come all back together. I think I saw then that Frankie just went for the sprint, but she needs to be told that there's no points at the finish line. I don't know if she was attacking the riders there or going for that, but I'm pretty sure there's no points on the finish line there.
Yeah, I think you're right, Matt.
2 other climbs. Yeah.
I mean, she's sat well in a group of 5 now, and actually, if this group does start to work, actually, I don't see any reason why they can't stay away for at least another lap or so and hoover up the majority of the points on the intermediate sections. And actually, I mean, when you look back down through the sort of top 20 now, actually they are literally, they're splintered into ones and twos, and there's not going to be much of a concerted effort there. But good news for us is actually one of the Rocket Cobbled riders seems to have dropped off the back of this group. 1 second adrift, but seems to be pushing hard to get back on. 9 metres back, the South African C Webb. But it looks like she's probably going to make it back on, I imagine, down this descent.
Yeah, it looks like she's going to get on. She's within the draft. She's going downhill, so I think it should be fairly easy just to roll back onto the back of this quartet. I think it's 4 riders, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or 5 riders. The group behind at around 17 seconds, 17, 20. It still looks pretty split. But down this little descent, I'd imagine it would all start to come back together again. But then we come to the next set of climbs, so really not much recovery. As the next Libby Hill KOM starts at kilometre 14.8, so what's that in about 3 kilometres time?
And these speeds, it would be a little over 3 minutes as well.
Yeah, so still, this is probably the last part of the course. You can rest before these final climbs come up.
As Frankie gets into that.
I'm looking at the live results now, and we've got Hannah at 24 seconds, and then Chloe in that group at 29 seconds. So it's just hovering at 4 or 5 seconds here, but on this descent, it should all come back together.
Frankie's certainly making the most of being in this group at the moment. She's sort of, well, from what I can see, she's definitely the rider making the most of Zwift's super tuck position as they round the corner now into the final little bit of descent before they run along the river. She seems to have spent a good proportion of those short, sharp and steep descents in that super tuck position, which essentially means that she isn't pedalling, or at least isn't pedalling forward. I think you can still pedal backwards, but basically no pressure on the pedals. So she'll be getting a nice rest going into this, fairly flat, if not slightly downhill section by the river.
Yeah, as you can see, her heart rate's dropped down to 130, so she's really been able to recover as much as possible down that descent before this final flat section, before the next couple of climbs. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the group behind. I think they're slowly closing, creeped back a couple of seconds, but is still holding around that 20 to 25 second mark. I think there's Aldenies in that group as well. I've seen Hannah and Chloe with a group a little bit behind that with Flora and Meg, and obviously they can keep riding, get points for the finish, and get potentially the fastest segments as well, which is still possible.
Yeah, I guess one of the tactics that teams have been employing across the races over the last few weeks is actually riders who've dropped off the back. They just absolutely go full gas for that 1 kilometre section, for example, and actually try and get onto that leaderboard to snap up some points at least if they do get dropped. But I imagine with the pace of the Libby Hill climb, that could be quite a difficult scenario to execute today, especially given that the first couple of 100 metres of it really do rely on you being in the draft to go quick, especially as the rise out the front and putting down some serious power or dropping some power ups, which are of course allowed in this points race, whereas last week in the team time trial that we watched, they weren't permitted.
Yeah, a couple of power-ups I think you've seen already today. Got the aero power-up, the featherweight power-up, and the drafting power-up. All give a slight benefit to the riders. So the aero power-up gives you reduced drag for 15 seconds. The feather power-up reduces your weight, I believe, by 9 kilograms for 15 seconds. And the truck power-up gives you 30 seconds of increased draft. So it is a game of luck in a way as to what power-up you get, but it's also important to use your power-ups at the right time. So obviously the faster sections in the sprint, use your aero power-up, up the steeper climbs using the feather power-up.
So we've got 3 riders in this fairly substantial chasing pack now. So we just lose the fridge to the riders, there they are again. So we've got Chloe, we've got Hannah, and we've got Alderney in this group. As you can just see on the screens in front, that quintet of 5 are just about to be swallowed up by this group, and they will probably form a peloton of around about 20-25 riders, I would imagine, just sort of looking at the screen there and taking a bit of a guesstimate as they go around that hairpin bend and start to get ready for the dotted red line that denotes the start of the Libby Hill climb.
Yeah, it's quite a big group, that really, isn't it? How many seconds is it up until the front group? Because I think these could carry a lot of speed into the climb and reduce that gap quite significantly. It'll be interesting to see how much they close in up here and if it splits again.
I think they've been swallowed up. I think
they've been swallowed up.
Yeah, I think that front group containing Frankie is now part of this group. So this is your leading pack.
Oh, that's very interesting. So maybe Frankie and those other riders in that breakaway might have just used a couple of matches, maybe a little bit earlier on. We'll see at this final climb. Yeah. Maybe they eased back because they knew that group was coming in. They're fresher. It's still quite early on in the race, really. We've still got around 30 kilometres to go. So still plenty of time for attacks to be made, for riders to get dropped, for fireworks, basically.
So Frankie and Alderney, who we're on board now with, are towards that front third of the pack. Still sat on the wheels, so in a good position should they want to attack. But like you said there, Matt, I would perhaps suggest maybe not going with the leaders this time, given that, I mean, those were arguably the strongest riders in the race who went away last times, and they didn't manage to stay away. So actually, maybe that's a sign of things to come, and it's actually better off just sitting in the pack. But as we see, it is blowing apart on these real tight and steep corners as they round the penultimate bend. It is Frankie again driving out the front with 9.1 watts per kilo. Alderney there sitting in 4th. So Frankie she looks set to take another 10 points here. Alderney there sat in 6th place. And then we've got Hannah again in 9th place. So Frankie takes 10 points. Yep, Alderney there in 6th place and Hannah in 9th. So a good load of points there for us. Again, keep an eye on the Loughborough cycling riders. 2 riders there, 2nd and 3rd for them. So their points total, I can't do the maths that quickly, but I think they're probably about level with us on that climb. And even though they only had 2 riders in that top 10.
Yeah, it looks like the race is really starting to split now. Obviously, we've got Frankie in that front group, and we've got Alderney in that front group as well. I think Hannah is around just a couple of seconds behind. So Frankie could just ease off. Maybe they could get 3 riders in that front group, with Chloe just a couple of seconds behind them as well. So this front selection is definitely being made now, and I think there's a good number of riders from the Loughborough Lightning, the Recruitment Group team in there, which is good for the final 3 laps. There's still plenty of points available.
And Chloe, like you mentioned, she is actually at the front of still a fairly good group, so there's 6 of them there. So actually, if they do get distance, it's perhaps not the end of the world, because they still can use their numbers and use their Zwift physics to get back into the race. So although that front selection is being made, I would still argue that Chloe is still on the cusp of being able to stay with the front packs.
Yeah, definitely. If she can carry some good speed, I think, as she's done here, up this steep climb, they could come back together over the top. As you can see, she's going,
Chloe's just gone past Hannah.
She's gone past Hannah here.
Yeah.
That just shows you what the draft can do in this game, especially if you're in a bigger group. Use the draft, carry more speed into the climb, and it just takes you further with less power.
It's good to see them riding side by side there as well.
Quite interesting, Zwift, really. Just 1-2 seconds off this little group. If they can get in here, that'll be really good. Certainly possible. One big effort up to speed, and the riders will be there after coming to the end of lap 2. So 3 laps left. Still plenty of racing.
As you can see in the top right hand corner mini map, the riders are spaced out in 1s and 2s. So that means that riders like Chloe and Hannah, can still work together and stand a very, very good chance of making it into a front bigger group, as if you like, and as both of them now get into that super tuck position, showing that they are well over that 56 or 57 kilometres an hour, I think it is, threshold to jump into that super tuck, still holding over 60k an hour, even on the flats.
Yes, so just coming to the bottom of this little descent now before they take on the second attempt at Governor Street. So 600 metres at around 6% with that false flat again. As I'm looking in the chat, to Vast, let us know who's watching, come and say hi. So if you're in the chat, write a message, come and let us know who you are. We've had Bert, come and say hi, so hi Bert. Don't forget to like this stream. Tell everyone about it, all your friends, all your family. Come and join us. Come and watch a bit of racing. Obviously, Giro d'Italia starts this weekend, but that's no excuse not to come and watch us again next week.
The what, Matt? The Giro?
Gyro. Or the Giro.
Yeah. Say it properly.
I'm saying it quickly, okay?
Yeah, I think actually, for me personally, this length of race, given that it's going to be a little over an hour now, actually, it mimics the real life racing a little bit more. Actually, there's that much more opportunity to replicate team tactics, and it rewards riders who've been putting in those hours over the winter, and sort of those riders who perhaps are your more crit style riders who are great for 30-40 minutes of effort, maybe get found out a little bit in the last few laps here. So I think it's certainly an interesting one for everybody to watch and get involved with.
Yeah, it's looking like it's going to be around about an hour and 10-minute race, I'd say, which is similar to what a couple of the riders did this weekend at the Leicestershire Road Bike Time Trial. So that was quite a good setup for this course. It was a similar amount of climbing in a pretty similar distance as well. But obviously on Zwift it's a little bit different to out on the road. You don't have to sit in the aero position as you do on the road. And you're not being called by the air, you're being called by your own fans.
So Alderney has just lost contact a little bit with the front five riders. She's with a Swiss rider from the KCA1 team. So I guess the mission for her is to try and jump on the back of the five riders, or perhaps cut her losses and save a bit of energy, drop back into the bigger group, which features Chloe and Hannah, and try and work together to build back up to the front five riders. And actually, it's all still pretty close. Those riders behind still only between 13 and 20 seconds on the right hand side there. And as we saw, that gap, or those gaps, can come down really, really quickly when we're going downhill, especially in a bigger group. I was sceptical on the first lap, but Matt corrected me, and he was right.
Yeah, as you can see here, Alderney's had a good use of the truck power up to get in the draft of that rider and to get into that front group. I think it's better to be in that front group than to wait. It's better to be in the front foot. Was it on the front foot? Mm-hmm. Than chasing. She can just, if she needs to rest, she can just sit in the draft, take a rest on this next descent before lap 3 of these climbs. As you can see, she gone off the front of this group as well.
Yeah, so
she's attacked to follow a couple of those riders.
Hopefully she doesn't think there's points available on this sprint line. But yeah, you're right, she's sitting in 4th, so Frankie's a couple of seconds back, down there in roughly 7th-ish. So yeah, she's actually got the jump on that main group, which is great to see her taking it to them.
Yeah, I think that's a good move. 3 riders away onto this flat section. If they can get a couple of seconds into the next climb, just makes it easier for that next climb. Looks like she's gone past this group as well, so she's really, maybe she was bluffing a little bit on that final climb and used the draft, came past the riders with speed so they couldn't jump back on her wheel. But it looks like she's got a good move on here. She's got 11 seconds to this group containing Frankie behind. What's that, 11, 12 seconds it's going up as well. If she can just get a couple of riders to come with her, that'll definitely help every little bit of draft is very useful in this game. She's coming down the descent now with another 2 riders just coming onto her back wheel. They can use the other riders to get up to speed and to go faster down this descent, really.
I'm not sure how much help she's really going to get. Obviously, there are 2 BZR riders in here, which means they're going to work together. But actually, in terms of numbers, it's only Hayes who's actually really within touching distance of this group, with the rest of the riders a further 16 plus seconds back. A group which, of course, includes Frankie.
Yes, I'm looking at the live timings now. If you want to have some stats, their ETA is around 1 hour 7 minutes, and currently this front group have averaged around about the 4.5, 4.3 watts per kilo. Alderney's actually done quite well. She's had the lowest average power out of all of them at 4.2 watts per kilo, showing that the expertise in drafting in this game, which is very solid. A couple of riders a little bit lower, but a lot of riders have been putting out more power than her, so it's good to see. Yeah, it's quite a big skill within the game, drafting, and in a way trying to do as little as possible, but then you have more energy when you need it on the important parts of the race, so you can really push on and win the bike race.
So in terms of our riders in the top 30 at the moment, we've got Chloe sitting in a group in 16th at the moment. She is also joined by Hannah, so they're still in that group together, which also includes Frankie. So there is a group of, well, it's, exactly 11 riders. And then you've got a group of 3 riders sandwiched between the front trio, which includes Alderney, and that third group on the road, which includes our 3 riders I just mentioned. So there are 3 standout groups at the moment on the road.
Yeah, it looks like this front group has still got a pretty good gaps, around 16, 17 seconds as well, as they start coming towards the bottom of this third climb. I think we've still got, another 2.5 kilometres before they start to tackle this climb. I said 16 seconds, it's now jumped up to around 20 seconds, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Frankie is in this group, which is about 8 seconds adrift now. And then, we've got 2 of our riders in the group, which is about 15 seconds further back. Again, you can just see them in the background of your screen there with the Tron bikes lighting up the relative darkness of the Richmond night sky.
An interesting bit of tactics here in this race. Obviously, none of the Rocker Corbin riders made it into that front group, so they're having to chase, and Frankie's getting a free ride, really. She can sit on and save some energy for later on in the race. So this is, for those who didn't say that Zwift is tactical racing, here's an example of some tactical racing within Zwift. It's still, it's not exactly like real life, but especially last year when there was no racing, it was pretty much the closest you're going to get. As for me, I raced it a lot. I think you raced it quite a bit as well, didn't you, Travis?
I did, yeah.
Definitely a fun platform. A little bit different to road racing. Obviously, you're not cornering yourself and all that, but it's definitely painful.
I think there are certainly a lot of parallels to be taken from it. And actually, it's a discipline in its own right. So actually, I think as it's gaining more and more respect amongst the cycling community, it got its own World Championships last year. So actually, I think... it's, although you can try and compare it to real life, and a lot of people do, myself included, but actually I think as it grows in popularity, I think it's just going to become one of the accepted disciplines of cycling, like, for example, track cycling or cyclocross or road racing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely different. But esports is definitely gaining a lot of traction at the moment. As I see in the chat, Max Holgate says, "Hi Travis and Matt, loving the commentary. Thank you for joining in. I'm glad you're enjoying it." we're about halfway through the moment, 23.5 kilometres in, or maybe a little bit more because I'm about 6 seconds delayed. But we're just about to hit the third ascent of this Libby Hill climb, one that myself is probably my favourite in the game for specific reasons. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens at this climb. Will the group behind split again? Will they all come back together? But it's looking like this group should stay away for quite a considerable time. They've got that 18 seconds. They'll make it over these climbs and stay in that front group. May jump across. We'll see in a minute, won't we?
Yeah, I think the rider from BZR is trying to make a break for it. Sort of got a bit of a gap between Alderney and Hayes. There's actually 3 riders in that back group. So one of the riders from BZR is being chased down by another rider from BZR on the front of this group. Bit strange tactics, perhaps to try and go for a 1-2. But in effect, that second BZR rider is just giving Alderney and Hayes a free ride. So hopefully Alderney can capitalise on this as they go round the penultimate corner, and Alderney drops down that feather power up as she goes past into pole position. Has she gone a bit early as it kicks up to 10%? That was a fantastic kick from Alderney. Saw the numbers light up, and as you see her Zwift avatar got out the saddle. 12, 13%, 8%, and that is 10 points sealed for Loughborough Lightning, the recruitment group from Alderney. Climb executed to perfection there, wasn't it, Matt?
Yeah, that was a bag. That's what it's going to be. A lot more points on the Rocket Corp riders. So
yeah, sorry,
absolutely Matt, amazing job there.
Interrupting you again, Frankie came across for 5th there, and Hannah is a further 30 seconds down, but she could still be in with some points on the climb for 10th place. So let's jump back with her. She's not on her own, but she's trying to stretch out the riders behind. There's a Malaysian rider just on her wheel. She managed to manage to hold her off. 4.8, 4.9 watts per kilo. 4.7. Final little dig. Looks like she's just... Oh no, it's still showing as 10th place. So not all is lost. There's still another point in the bag for Loughborough Lightning, the recruitment group. So actually that's a very, very decent number of points for us. And I think Rocket Corba only managed 6th and 7th in that group. And obviously there's another Rocket Corba rider there in 12th position. So we hopefully gain a few points on them on that climb.
Yeah, every point matters in this game. So very solid lap there. As the riders are still in the breakaway, they've still got another chance to gain a lot more points at this next climb of 23rd Street. I'm not sure if it's my computer lagging at the moment or the stream's lagging, but I think it's probably my computer. But we're coming into 23rd Street now. Is it Alderney?
Yeah, so
Frankie has just gone ahead.
Frankie has just gone past Alderney, so Alderney's now sitting in 4th. Frankie takes 3rd on the 23rd Street climb. Alderney just crossing the line in 4th, so that is 3rd and 4th. Again, fantastic points scoring there, but both these girls need to make sure they are not distanced by Hayes and the rider from BZR. Again, that was a great little breakaway on this lap. They need to sort of muck together again and try and stay in a working group. Again, those 2 climbs are obliterated. Well, this select group at the front. And yeah, I mean, fingers crossed, Alderney can get back onto Frankie's wheel, who is 4 seconds ahead of her, as she just jumps into that aero tuck position. One BZR rider immediately behind her, followed by 2 Rocket Corba cycling riders. So even better if she can distance those 2 riders.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be the select group of 8, 9 riders here. I think these are the ones that are going to go all the way. They've got 40, 45 seconds on that big group behind. I can't see them coming back, but they can still take some points in this race for 9th and 10th on each segment. But 2 riders from Rocket Corba 2 riders from BZR and 2 riders from the Loughborough Lightning, the Recruitment Group team. So it's all to play for still in this finale. 2 laps to go, around 20 kilometres. I think bang on 20 kilometres. 6 more climbs to come. Still all to play for.
Yeah, as Frankie's just trying to bridge across to Hayes and that rider from BZR. I don't think there's too much panic to do so, given that Alderney and a group of further 4 or 5 riders is only a few seconds adrift. I would imagine this would come back together again after this final climb. It's a tough one, isn't it, given that it's uncategorised. I'm really surprised that it's not featured more heavily in the sort of pre-race and the in-race graphics.
Yeah, it's not a overly big climb, but once you've done those 2 beforehand, you're pretty cooked when you get to it, and it's a bit too long to be able to sprint up it, a bit too shallow. You can still draft on it, but it really saps you. Once you're already in pain as well, once you're already suffering, it's just hard to go again on this climb, because you look at the road, it doesn't look too steep. You can have it in your head that I can go a little bit easier up here, but if other riders are pushing on, you can really suffer and lose a lot of time on this short 6-7% climb.
It certainly seems like there's quite a variable gradient as well, whereas the other two, you kind of know where you stand. Libby Hill is fairly sort of flat on the first couple of 100 metres, and then it's just all guns blazing, super painful, sharp climb for the second half, and 23rd Street is just basically a ski slope all the way up, whereas this seems to be jumping up and down.
Yeah, it's really hard to get in rhythms. Like, you kind of think it's quite a long climb. It is only 600 metres, but there's a couple of sections around 4%, 3%, and then it kicks up just before that corner to around 8 or 9%. So it's pretty impossible to pace it. You can't kick as hard as you have the other climbs, because you've already had to make that effort at the 2 previous.
So Hannah and Chloe are in a group of 8 riders who are about halfway up the final climb on the circuit. So they're not a million miles off the front group, but like you said, I doubt they will make contact. But that is good news, because as you can see on the right hand side there, Hannah is sitting in 10th. So actually there are some still fairly significant points on the finish line to pick up for both Hannah and Chloe if they can finish towards the front of this group. Also, crucially, there is those 10th place segment points that they can sweep up on the next 2 laps, and I mean, potentially, hopefully, working together, they can try and do their best to sweep up those points, because as you say, Matt, every point counts in sort of the total at the end of the race.
Yep, even just 1 or 2 points every lap, that can all add up, and especially in these races, it can all come down to just 1 or 2 points. As I say, 2 laps to go, 3/5 of the way in. Thank you all for joining us, and don't forget, come say hi in the chat. Any questions, any riders you want to support as we watch Alderney now, just detached from that group, but she did make that really big effort up at Libby Hill, and she's still got a good gap to the group behind, so she can just push on, get to these next climbs before that other group. She can still gain 6 or 7, 4 or 5 points.
I imagine it's a tall order though, in that she's on her own, and there's a couple of fairly steep descents coming up. So actually, I think she'll probably be swallowed up by those following riders. Frankie is in a group of 4 out front, as she's making another bid to gap those riders behind. So she's not letting up on the pace at all. But this could be good. This could be good for Loughborough Lightning in the recruitment group still, because actually, if that group balloons to maybe 14 riders instead of the 8 riders at the moment, they're much more likely to all kind of come together again. And I'd certainly back our girls in a sprint finish, that's for sure, or to finish really strongly on the final lap. So either way, I think it's definitely a positive for our riders.
Yeah, so as we see Frankie go off the front here, sprint sprinting. I don't know if she was attacking or sprinting into this descent so she could get in the super tuck and rest just that little bit. But it doesn't look like she's made much of a gap there as they all come back together at the bottom of this descent before we take on the fourth time of this Riverside Road. Or again, a climb that you'll be all too familiar with of Libby Hill.
So Alderney is a further 20-25 seconds behind this group of four, and then further 30 seconds